video is sponsored by MPB.
As a tiny camera enthusiast, I think it's fair to say that there is a big gap in my tiny camera series that I haven't addressed so far. And that is, of course, the Sony RX100 series of premium compact cameras. I think they're largely regarded as probably the most over-engineered, over-nerdy premium compacts on the planet. So why is it taking me so long to have a look? And what is so special about them? Well, first of all, the money. They are beautiful, they are pretty unique, and by goodness does the used market know it. These are not the cheapest cameras in the world, but there are 7 iterations of them, so you can find a bargain, and I do have a buying guide towards the end of this video, so stick around for that. So now I've got to grips with one, the RX100 5 in this case. What do I think? In 2016, the Sony RX100 5 came out, and it brought with it some big upgrades. The most notable probably being that it has a 1-inch stacked sensor in a premium compact. And now a stacked sensor gives you all that lovely goodness of having fast write speeds, very minimal rolling shutter, and it's generally great for burst modes. And that bodes very well because in the 5, we have Sony's hybrid phase detect autofocus system. It has 315 phase detect autofocus points on the sensor, and it covers the vast majority of the sensor. So this is crazy to me, with it being such a compact everyday carry sort of camera. You have 24 frames a second of burst modes with continuous autofocus, and the buffer is a very generous 150, so you can shoot and shoot and shoot till your heart's content. There's even some basic human eye and face detection as well. There's no dedicated subject detection like animal or train or plane like you might find in a more modern camera, but this is well before its time. I mean, if you compare it to Micro Four Thirds, it took OM system until 2022 to get the OM1 with a stacked sensor and some very fast burst modes. And things are even worse on the Lumix side. You had to wait all the way till 2023 for the G9 II to get some comparable burst modes. There's no stacked sensor on the Lumix side either. Now, I'm not saying that the RX100 5 is generally comparable to these two flagship cameras. Of course, you're going to want the Micro Four Thirds flagships for wildlife and sports because you have interchangeable lenses, you have subject detection, you have all kinds of extra benefits over the RX100 5. I just thought it was really interesting to sort of show you that in 2016, these specs were incredible anyway, but then more so incredible that they were in such a small form factor. There's so much interesting stuff with the RX100 5. It was the last of this series of cameras to have built-in ND filters, for example. You have 3 stops of ND built in, and you can leave it automatically in the camera, so it will choose when you need it and when you don't, or you can set it yourself. This is great because you have optical stabilization built in with the lens, no IBIS unfortunately, but it is tiny, so that makes sense. And that means with the ND filter you could get some handheld long exposures perfectly fine, and of course you can use it for video as well, which it shoots 4K 30. I remind you, from 2016. The video quality in this is superb. It really does hold up, and it even has a flat log profile built in, the Sony S-Log 2. So that means if you had other bigger cameras in your lineup, you could probably match the footage pretty accurately between this and something else. And because I am a complete camera nerd, I did some digging. I have a fun fact. I cannot explain to you how rare it is to get a fixed lens camera, or let alone a premium compact camera, that has these 3 things: built-in ND filters, optical stabilization, and also a flat profile for video editing. In fact, in my research, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, the only one that ticks all 3 of those boxes is the Fujifilm X100 6. And we all know how popular that is. So this is what I mean when I say this camera is stupidly over-engineered and really nerdy in such a small form factor. I think it's an unwritten rule in the camera industry, an incorrect rule, I might add, that small cameras equal a stripped down, more basic functionality. I think manufacturers believe that beginners want small, easy to use, beginner friendly cameras, but I think sometimes the opposite is true. I think it's often the most enthusiastic photographers that want an everyday carry and want to have something special and high spec in a small form factor so they can take it out with them every single day. I think there's very few camera manufacturers that get this right. And when they do, look at how the market responds. Look at how the Ricoh GR series is taken into account. Look at the Fuji X100 series and look at the RX100 series from Sony. People are screaming out for high spec small cameras, and clearly the used market prices reflect that there's still a great demand for this. So what do we get ergonomically with this little unicorn camera? Well, you have the cutest pop-up EVF, which ticks a lot of boxes for everyday carry enthusiasts. I love this mechanism. You just pop it up and then the camera turns on automatically. Of course, it's quite a small EVF. Don't expect it to be like a big panoramic view, but it does do the job. The screen also articulates, and you do have a pop-up flash that has sort of a springy mechanism, so you can shoot it up to bounce it off the ceiling for some more diffused light. There are not many tactile dials and function buttons. It is quite minimal, and you do find a lot of the settings inside the menu, but I think you get a heck of a lot of interesting physical features on this camera that tick a lot of boxes in a very small form factor. Now, while earlier iterations of this camera did have a hot shoot, the number 5 doesn't, but I don't think it's overly missed. One thing that I would have loved to have seen is a built-in mic input. You have to wait all the way to the Mark 7 for that. So while the video is great and you do have an ND filter built in, if you do want to record audio, you are stuck with the onboard camera microphones, unfortunately. While it is quite expensive, I do think the build quality lives up to the price. It does feel very sturdy in the hand. It's a mixture of metal and plastic components. It's very, very robust. I think it's very stylish too. I think there's a reason that they didn't tinker with the look of it throughout the majority of this series of cameras, because they just hit the ground running with it and it looks lovely. You wouldn't think looking at this that it's almost a 10-year-old camera. And the thread to get through like a wrist strap thingamabob is very, very small. I found that I couldn't get the Peak Design anchor through it without really forcing it and fraying it. But the PGY Tech anchor went through absolutely fine. So I did manage to get it on a little wrist strap and it was no bother. So despite all the fancy bells and whistles and the burst modes and the stacked sensor, I found myself just enjoying the heck out of this camera, taking simple photographs. I took this camera on a little trip with my family and my dog, and I kept the camera in like my handbag, not even a camera bag, because it is so small. It was so simple to just take it out of my bag, take some quick snaps and put it back in again. And while my dog is not the fastest in the world, she is 86 years old in human years. She's 14 and a bit. She fell over some seaweed and got scared by a puddle on the beach. I think this camera is by far the best autofocus that I've ever used in any premium compact size camera, and also it's probably going to be a lot better than a lot of older Micro Four Thirds cameras as well. The lens is absolutely epic, and bear in mind this feature if you are looking at buying different versions of this camera, because the lens is different on different models. The 5 gives you a 24-70 f1.8 to 2.8, and in my opinion it is the strongest lens on all of the RX100 series. Absolutely wonderful, versatile enough, and very, very fast. The JPEG options are very pleasing, they're nice, they get the job done, but there isn't much customization, and I think the colours are very nice out of camera, but I do think if you want a more stylized look, you are going to be editing the RAWs with this camera. So if you are intrigued by the RX100 line and would like a absolute crash course in which one might be best for you and which ones are the best bargains, hold on to your hats and let me get nerdy. So while the Mark 1 and the Mark 2 are by far the cheapest, I would personally skip 1 and 2 in this line of cameras. The lens that you get on the 1 and the 2 is a more versatile option but slower, so it's a 28 to 100 f1.8 to 4.9. So versatile, yes, but it's not quite as fast at the long end. And you also get no EVF and no phase detect autofocus, and of course no stacked sensor as well. In my opinion, things start to get really interesting with the RX100 III. And I think in terms of spec and price, this is probably the one for the bargain hunters. We get the same lens as the one on the Mark 5, so that's the 24-70 f1.8 to 2.8, which in my opinion is the best one of the bunch. You also get ND filters built into this, and it's the first one to add the pop-up flash. With the Mark III, you do only get contrast-based autofocus and of course no stacked sensor. However, I've used many a premium compact like the Lumix LX100 or the LX15 with contrast-based autofocus, and if you want to just shoot day-to-day life, 90% of the time it's absolutely fine. So if you want a bargain, my money is on the Mark III. The Mark IV is sort of in a weird spot where yes, you get 4K video, yes, you get the stacked sensor, however, they've paired that with contrast-based autofocus. So you do get the option to do fast burst modes, fast reading and writing speeds, really good rolling shutter, but you don't have the autofocus system to back it up yet. So for that reason, number 4 for me is probably a little bit more expensive than it needs to be on the used market. I would get the 3 or the 5. The 5 is the one that I've largely been discussing in this video. We have phase detect autofocus, we have the stacked sensor, we have all the lovely goodness that I've demonstrated in this video, and it's very, very nice. I think the 5 is also a good sweet spot. The 3 and the 5 is where my money is at. And I'll tell you why. I'm not just being like picky, but the 6 gets weird, and I don't think it's a great choice. In the premium compact land, 2 things can happen. You can either have a good lens or a zoom lens. There's very few cameras with a 1-inch sensor that will give you a good zoom lens. Look at the new travel zoom that Lumix brought out. The lens gives you ample zoom, but the aperture is a bit pants and the image quality is terrible. Give me an LX15 any day. And I think for my needs, your mileage might vary. I think the RX100 was better when it had the simple fast 24-70. In the Mark VI and beyond, you get a 24 to 200mm lens. However, the widest minimum aperture is narrower. It's 2.8 to f4.5 versus 1.8 to 2.8 on the Mark V. And because the lens is bigger, there's no longer space for the built-in ND filters. I can see some people seeing the appeal of having a very versatile, zoomy sort of lens that you can fit in your pocket, especially if it does have all the burst modes and the stacked sensor for bits of wildlife. However, for me, I much prefer the lens on the Mark V. Let me know in the comments what you think. Number 7, the latest one, is another over-engineered marvel. They've stuck with the zoom lens, which I'm less of a fan of, but they've given this tiny premium compact the same subject and tracking modes that the Sony A9 has. So this is really high-end autofocus system in a premium compact. Mental. And I suppose, you know, if you are going to use those features, maybe having the extra zoom would be good. It is the only one thus far that has a mic input. So if you were interested in using this as a vlogging camera, then that's probably the only one that is the option unless you use the onboard mics. So for my picks, I like the 3, I like the 5. I'm moderately intrigued with the 7, but you do pay quite a lot for that model. If you're looking for a bargain, look for the 3. And if you're looking for any of them, the first place that you should look is the sponsor of today's video, MPB. MPB is the world's largest platform for buying, selling and trading all of your wonderful camera equipment. Each item is individually inspected and the photographs that you see on the website is the copy that you get. So you'll be able to see straight away what the camera looks like cosmetically. I have shopped with MPB for years and years and years. I buy many a camera from them and I've never had a single problem. And the millennial in me, I just love not being able to talk to people. I love that if I want to sell or trade or buy with MPB, I can do it all instantly on the website, get quotes instantly without ever having to pick up the phone and talk to someone. I think getting a warranty on a used camera, particularly a more expensive one like the RX100 series, is worth its weight in gold. I mean, if you were to buy this off an auction site, it's sort of the Wild West, isn't it? If something goes wrong a couple of weeks later, what are you going to do? So if you'd like to buy used with peace of mind from a very reputable and wonderful company that supports creators like my nerdy self, check out MPB, and thank you as always to them. Now let's get back to the nerdiness. So what do I think about the RX100? I bloomin' love the 5. I fell a little bit in love with it, to be honest. There is a part of me that maybe wants to shuffle around some of my equipment so that I could get one. I do miss the touchscreen. I think the lens on the 5 is very, very nice. The image quality is wonderful. The EVF is charming, if a little bit kooky. A lot of other brands could learn from Sony. I think getting all the specs in the world into tiny cameras is a feat of engineering and really, really beneficial to the camera nerds out there. So if I'm going to get picky, Because no camera's perfect. Yes, I wish the 5 had a touchscreen, but I don't want to go up the range and lose the nice lens in order to get the touchscreen. I wish the customizable JPEGs were a little bit more flamboyant and creative and not just playing it safe. I wish it was a bit more tactile. It's a very modern feeling camera where a lot of the settings are in the menus. And while objectively the Lumix LX100 is older and less good in many, many ways, I do think it's a lot more charming having this tactile experience where you have your aperture ring and your shutter speed ring, and it feels like you're tweaking the camera to get the images that you want when you have a tactile camera. When you let the camera choose most of the settings, it does feel like more of a modern experience. It's not a bad thing, it's just down to personal taste. The main criticism with the RX100 line, and I can only assume it gets worse as the camera gets more advanced, the battery in it is very small and it will drain relatively quickly. For day-to-day snapping, taking the camera out of my bag, taking pictures of my dog at the beach, it was absolutely fine. You could get several days of use out of that with no problem. When you start shooting video and doing things with a little bit more intensity, you will notice the battery drain. The good thing is the batteries are very small, so there's no reason why you couldn't keep a couple of spares with you. And aside from that, my only criticism is because it is such a unicorn sort of camera range, my goodness, does the used market know it. You have to really fish around to get a good bargain. If more camera manufacturers took a leaf out of Sony's book and entered into the fray and gave us a bit more competition, then things would simmer down. But as it stands, Sony know that they have a pretty unique product on their hands. So, other brands, be more like Sony, then everyone wins. So let me know in the comments which version of this camera you like the best, which one has caught your eye, or which one do you use? And if you would like more guidance on tiny camera goodness, check out my tiny camera series playlist.